a good song. It's a good song. It makes me feel good
every time.
It makes me feel so good every time that I hear it, because it means a lot.
You know what?
One, we're about to talk, and two, it's the end of the week.
You know what makes me feel good every time is knowing that we have this fantastic show together, Tristan. And we can have guests tune in online, and they can interact with us in the chat box. We tell them some really cool things going on, and I get a chance to speak with you.
It's great. I love it when the people who are watching leave comments for us, even if it's just hello, because it feels like so good to be like, oh, someone out there in the void is listening. And cares. No, but I love it. Thank you so much if you're joining us live for GPS Live for the week of March 31st, 2023. We're going to start numbering these. I think we need to like go back and count how many we've done.
You are totally stealing my suggestion. I think I planted that in your brain.
I was about to say Jonathan suggested this, like earlier this week, that we go back and start numbering these.
We've done a lot,
and yeah, what was that?
A lot of episodes.
Yeah, we've done quite a few of these now. We need to go back and find out like when our 1 year anniversary is coming up so that we can do something special.
We have our first comment. Hello to you too, Adam.
Oh, hello, Adam. So thank you so much if you're joining us live. We really appreciate it. If you're watching the video on demand and giving us some time that way, we also appreciate it. We can still see those comments. We go back and check stuff. Not as often as we should, but we do. And we have some fun stories. But first off, Jonathan, how are you? I was out last week.
I'm well. We had a little fill-in. Adrian was great to have on the show and some good stories. And so I feel like we tackled it. But we're glad to have you back. Doing quite well. In fact, a little bit of local fun here. Our B-Sides Tampa is tomorrow, so I'll be out there attending that. For any of our local Tampa guests or other Floridians around here, I'll see you at the conference.
Yeah, Jonathan will be there. He's doing signings from noon to 2.
Don't even get me started on my was it? I'm gonna have like a picture of me. I'm gonna sign it with like a marker. Yeah.
We're gonna ride this fame gravy train all the way through.
You're that guy from that show on GPS Live.
Yeah, you do the thing. I was out last week at the thing that I usually do, which is the board gaming conferences that I go to and teach people how to play games. But I've got a fun little update. We talked about a story a couple weeks ago. We talked about like some two-factor authentication stuff, and some frustrations around two-factor authentication, the way that it works. I believe specifically it was around the fact that like a couple sites were toying with the ideas of removing or paywalling security features like two-factor authentication.
That's real.
So this last weekend, I was at Penny Arcade Expo in Boston, and I worked the night shift there. So I would go in at 6 p.m. and work till midnight. And before the shift started, I took a look at my phone. Everything was great. I set it down. Went about my shift. Came back at the end of the night. Checked it a couple times throughout, right? But like everything was fine. Come back at the end of the night. Maybe there's only an hour between the last time I saw it and now. And the screen is just freaking out. Like I have green fuzz kind of encroaching, like an eldritch terror coming in from the right side of the screen. And I was like, all right, my screen is clearly broken. I need to like try and get this fixed tomorrow.
Oh no.
I woke up the next morning and it had crept all the way to the point that there was only like the top left inch of my screen was visible and very dimly. So I went to Verizon. I used the fact that I hadn't upgraded my phone in a while, got a new phone earlier than I wanted to. Went to do the transfer process by hooking the two phones up to each other. I have to enter my PIN on the old phone. So I can't see the screen at all. I had to spend a bunch of time. I finally figured out that I could use TalkBack to help me map the buttons out on the screen by just randomly tapping and listening for what it said until I put like clear, Scotch tape over the screen and like labeled where the buttons were, got my PIN put in.
Oh my goodness.
Got everything transferred over. Didn't account for the fact that it's of course not going to transfer over my Google Authenticator codes. So I now had this new phone with all of my vital services that I use in my personal life that have 2FA turned on, assigned to the Google Authenticator on this old phone, and I can't scan the QR code on the old phone to get it ported out, to get all those new 2FA codes ported into my phone. So I've spent days and days and days working. Oh, you've got something.
No, I was gonna say I want to hear where you went with this, because I would imagine there's a way to virtualize your screen on a Mac.
So that's the thing. I looked around. Google has by default disabled, or they don't have the proper hardware in the phones to use DisplayPort alt mode for the USB-C port. So you have to download a DisplayLink app and then get a DisplayLink compatible adapter to go from USB-C that has like the proper chipset in it, and plug it into a TV. So while I was waiting for that to come from Amazon, I was researching some software side stuff. Found a GitHub project called SCRCPY, so screen copy. Downloaded that, you run it from terminal with your phone plugged in, and it just pulls your whole phone screen up interactive on your desktop. And I was like, great.
Amazing.
And I opened the Google Authenticator app, and it was a black screen because it's a secure app, so it won't allow anything from that app to be shown anywhere else.
No.
But I found out the way that I had to go back and do this was I had to turn the talkback feature back on, go into the apps that I wanted to do this for, and then blindly touch on the screen with Google Authenticator open until it would read like what the app was and then give me the code,
and the
but
number.
it would read it as an actual number. So it would be like 840,397. And I'm like, that's okay. That's this thing.
Type it in.
Had to manually disable and then re-enable 2FA on all of my devices in order to get everything ported over. But it was something I was thinking about, because I was like, this is actually, there are so many good lessons here that can come from this. From like the cybersecurity on the company side, right? Google made a really smart move in making sure that PIN screens, 2FA screens, anything like that cannot be shared off of a phone. Because things like screen copy, they rely on the ADB connection between a device and the computer, which often you're going to do with you're often going to do that with a USB cable, but it is possible to do it over Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. So if there was ever a flaw that were found that allowed someone to force an ADB connection wirelessly and then they ran screen copy, they would just be able to see your screen. But by blanking all that info out, Google's taken some really great steps there.
And this is why you don't turn on developer mode unless you truly need it.
Unless you truly need it, right?
Yeah.
And so there's some really great kind of things there around 2FA. But also some things, right? Having backup methods of 2FA is really key. But the thing that I learned is that tying 2FA to a thing that can only be accessed on my single device, not a great idea. So I went and found a 2FA solution that allows me to store those 2FA codes from a place that is accessible to me anywhere, but is still secure. So just some fun updates, thinking about two-factor authentication and ways to improve it. Do with that what you will.
Nice. Yeah, I would say there are some password managers that now support that can be cloud-based, so they can float from devices. And there's also hardware that is supported by several manufacturers, including Google.
So. And actually, Adam makes a great comment here. I don't know if the whole thing is showing on the screen right now, but he says, with having to download all of this software, this sounds also like a great entry point for malware. And that's why it took me so long to do all of this, right? Like Google recommends the DisplayLink app and it's an official thing. So I was like, great, that's fine. But when it came to like all of these other solutions that I was looking for, I spent hours and hours just like combing the internet to find any mention of like, does this thing do anything that I don't expect it to be doing? How much of this can I control? And then to the point that what I ended up doing was downloading it, getting it all set up, taking my Mac off the network so it couldn't make any connections to anything, running this and using it for my phone to try and access this stuff, and then deleting everything from the Mac and like before I did anything to like put it back on online. So I like tried to take as many steps to mitigate any potential connections. Obviously, I can't do everything, take care of everything, but like I tried to make sure, hey, let's keep this localized here. So
All
anyway,
right.
that took some
I'm glad you're
time.
back.
Hey, you know, it was just a fun. I was like, oh, it's not very often that the things that we talk about, I can be like, oh, there's a direct personal correlation that I have in my
Well,
life.
talking about personal things, let's talk about opinions real quickly. And
Yeah.
the fact that the views and opinions expressed by the host of this live stream are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official opinions of GuidePoint Security.
Thank you for remembering to do that. I was so excited
Uh,
about this story.
I know. Well, okay, so tell it. All right, let's do this. We'll jump right in, and I want you to tell us
Yeah.
about Android apps because apparently they're
Android.
really important to you. In fact, they're
Yeah.
apparently important to lots of users.
Adam's comment was actually a great segue into this story. So this story comes to us from Ars Technica, the Android app, a Chinese Android app called Pinduoduo.
Huge in China,
It's a
by the way.
hugely popular app in China. The headline is actually a little bit I don't want to say misleading, but I think it doesn't give a full picture of the story because the headline is just Android app from China executed zero-day exploit on millions of devices. And this is an e-commerce app called Pinduoduo. But then once you get into the story, it wasn't actually the official Pinduoduo that was causing this. So what happened is this hugely popular app, Pinduoduo, it blew up in China. But because China doesn't allow access to things like the Google Play Store or official app stores, right? Everything has to go through their filters. People were downloading Pinduoduo from third-party APK sites. And it turns out that millions of people downloaded a version that was officially digitally signed by the third biggest e-commerce company, right?
Yeah.
It was officially signed, but it was a malicious version that had been crafted. And it was carrying some malware called EvilParcel that then was basically remote activated across millions of devices all at once.
Yeah, and you know the story, yeah, it completely digs into it because there's a lot of interesting, components of this, right? One being a major player in the e-commerce space overseas, not necessarily right as big as some of the other companies you've probably heard of, like Great Alibaba and things of that nature, but it is way up
Yeah,
there. And because of the kind of the restrictions of some of these more massive, developers like Google and Apple and stuff like that, restrictions around their public stores, oftentimes users are forced to seek out applications through third-party sources. Sadly, those third-party sources may be backdoored, may be malicious, may be re-architected. And the tough part in this case was that it was actually signed by the official certificate, the official developer certificate of
yeah,
Pinduoduo. And that leaves a lot of open questions as to how they even got there in the first place, let alone the fact that they backdoored this app with a genuine unknown ODE at the time that was essentially benign until it was triggered
yeah,
remotely on all of the devices. And immediately when it was fired off, gave the attackers control.
yeah. And it's that specific exploit was CVE 2023-20963. But the interesting thing about that exploit is that Google had already patched that, and that was available to users 2 weeks ago. Right, or it's not that Google had already patched it, but that Google has patched that and it became available to users 2 weeks ago. But it kind of, I think one of the interesting aspect of this, like you said, is that the restrictions that are put in place on official app stores and on things by the great Chinese firewall, right? To lock off internet access and stuff. That also is going to affect things like security updates, like the ability to get official patches out there quickly. Anything can fall under the purview of that oversight. And so I think that's something that will kind of be interesting to watch with this. Remains to be seen. Is like, is this going to be will this continue to be exploited because people are having difficulty getting access to the security patch that would prevent them from running into this issue? But another interesting aspect of this story, I think, given the current climate of things around cybersecurity, is looking at the headline for this explicitly saying, hey, this is a Chinese app had a 0-day that allowed malicious access to devices and affected millions of users. But it's really important to then dig into that and see like, oh, this isn't a malicious thing simply because it is associated with China. This isn't a malicious thing simply because it came from this corner of the internet or is known to have these qualities. It wasn't the official version of the app that was causing these problems, right? It was a cracked off Google Play version that caused these issues and allowed this kind of access on these devices. And so it goes back to understanding and knowing that, like, in all aspects of cybersecurity, looking at things in depth and through all of those layers and all those lenses is important. You can't just look through the single lens and say, well, we know the full story.
There's a lot of moving parts to this, right? Between the official certificate, which actually was brought to the attention now of Google, and they've removed the official app because it was too closely tied. So, right, and it's kind of a timeline of things. People started talking about a month ago, saying, hey, there seems to be an issue with these apps. There's some researchers, somebody identified it. Then we get a CVE issued and a patch is put out by Google. And now Google, is going as far as saying, look, this malicious version that was out was signed with the official. Therefore, your apps that you're giving our Play Store are also signed with the official. We can't trust any of it right now. And so that has kind of triggered down. And now to say having a certificate stolen is not unheard of. But this does still lead a lot of open-ended questions, right? Is this something that is going on inside the organization? Is this potentially just maybe an individual or a set of individuals as insider threat, bad actors? Or was, a certificate indeed stolen and being used for malicious purposes? We've seen large companies like Microsoft have their certificates abused, NVIDIA have their certificate abused, and things of that nature. So we will wait to see how this develops.
And not to get to, but this is just something to think of from a practitioner's perspective, right? I know that we want to move on to the next story because we're tight on time because I took up a ton, but from a practitioner's perspective, something that's interesting about this, not to actually do any political commentary on current things that are happening in the US, right? But it is a factual statement to say that there's legislation on the table that is proposed to limit the use of TikTok within the United States based on the fact that it is a Chinese application. But looking at it from this story's perspective, right? This was a wildly popular app that the government of China limited access to, and so people sought out other means to get that app that were unofficial and unregulated. And so, as security practitioners, taking into account the fact that probably a lot of our employees at our organizations use an app like TikTok, use these extremely popular apps. And when that is taken away from them, when the official access and means is taken away from them, people are going to do what people do, and they will seek out alternative means to find the thing that they like. So should something like that occur here in the US, as security practitioners, we're going to have to be extremely aware of the fact that, like, now there's a whole new avenue open for malicious things to enter our environment because people are going to want to go find versions of this, and they may not be downloading safe and official versions. So
you really missed the show last week. You were loving this.
I'm loving this. This is great. But let's move on.
Well, so to kind of bounce from malicious Android apps to, let's actually talk about something that affects all of us, not just you Android users, but Wi-Fi flaws, right? This is a big one going around. An article coming to us from Bleeping Computer talks about a Wi-Fi flaw that allows attackers to hijack network traffic. Now, it's not that simple, but you were explaining a little of this to me before the show. And so what you were saying, my understanding is that, Wi-Fi now has a power saving feature that basically, a client or device lets the router, lets the network, know I'm going to go to sleep for a little bit. Can you just kind of backlog and hold on to stuff that's supposed to go my way? And then I'll let you know when I'm back awake, and you can come on and send it over. So thanks for being an awesome queue for me. But there's a problem, right? What like that queue is what's being targeted.
Yeah. So the IE 802.11 standard The
IEEE.
triple E includes this, the power save mechanisms to say, hey, a device can send a frame to the router to say, hey, I'm going to sleep, queue my stuff for me. But it does not include any guidance on securing those queued packets, or how long they can be stored before they're just deleted and have to be re-requested by the device when it wakes back up. And so what these researchers discovered is that they could spoof the MAC address of a device and send that sleep notification to the router, and it would immediately start buffering and queuing all of these things that had been requested by that device. And then they were able to go in, access the router, and manipulate that packet data, download it for themselves, reroute it to other devices on the network so that they could just be like, well, you're going to send that to me now. Which is pretty insane when you think about like the number of things that that your device requests in the background without you knowing about it, that could be security related, that could have secure information in them. Right? If someone were to spoof the MAC address of an employee's work device, and say, hold on to everything for me, and it was just about to receive like a bunch of stuff about like a bunch of email info or things like that, right? Like a bunch of things that have been requested that were secure. Hey, suddenly I can just reroute that.
Yeah, and this backlog, right? It kind of comes to show that manufacturers they're supporting, right, these standards, but they're not considering all components of it. And so for them to take the raw packet data, store it locally, which can technically be retrieved if you have access to the file system, and then decide what to do with it, whether that is forwarded onto another MAC address or host, or download those files directly. And there's a number of vendors that are called out in the article. I don't want to really get into who and what, but the point is that this is kind of across the board in the sense that there's a published standard, everybody develops around it, but researchers have since discovered that data handling, or at least what we call data at rest, has been left behind as when it comes to a security perspective, right? Especially since I've been seeing a lot of network-related ODAs popping up in vulnerabilities and CVEs as of late. And so if you can, in two parts, convince it to hold your data to be retrieved later, and then furthermore gain access to that device and physically retrieve it, this is definitely something. And so there are solutions in the works. It has been acknowledged, but this is something going on right now and affects Wi-Fi standards across the board.
And even bypasses some of the encryption too that some of these devices would do across those frames, right? Because once that sleep state is sent, they can also they can also send their own security context keys to change, or they can send their own authentication keys to change the security context of those frames that are waiting to be sent. So they can actually force the device to send them in plain text or to re-encrypt them using the attacker's keys. So there's a lot of power and access that's going on for this kind of thing, and they've built their own tools now that can be used to test a Wi-Fi network to find clients that are vulnerable to this, and then start the process.
So be on the lookout for patches for all of your Wi-Fi hardware, consumer and commercial.
New patches and a new IEEE. That'll be coming soon, I'm sure.
Yeah. All right. You want to take us to our next one?
Yeah. This story I found on The Verge, but it is a story about a massive Microsoft exploit that allowed some researchers to jump in and gain some pretty detailed access to things that they shouldn't have had access to. So this is like a privileged access management kind of flaw in the system. So essentially, what this was they it's a flaw or a vulnerability in the Azure Active Directory identity and access management services, which allowed someone essentially to use the inbuilt Microsoft Bing search engine to exploit their credentials to gain access to the backend of the Azure instance that they were using, manipulate the Bing search results so that they could insert their own results into things, and then as further follow on to the ability to do that, then gain access to things. I think specifically they use the Bing Trivia app page to pivot from there into things like Office 365 data, Outlook emails, calendars, just gain full access to this stuff in the back end. And my understanding, it's pretty detailed, and I'm still kind of wrapping my head around it a little bit. I just found it last night, or found it yesterday, but it essentially, it just relies on the fact that the way the privileges are set up within the back end, because they were able to gain access to this very small, inconsequential thing. The system was like, well, then you have access to this next layer up, and then you have access to this next layer up, and you can just kind of keep pivoting up from there. So they were able to just escalate through.
It goes to show how interconnected everything is, right? And for instance, for a lot of these major players, and they have ad networks especially, those ad networks are extrapolating data not just from public-facing users, but their private consumers too. For instance, if you're a user of Gmail, I mean, how do you think they know how to target you with ads?
Yep.
Right? It's been a long discussed thing that the content that is going on for their paid users still directly influences a number of things. And with those systems all interconnected behind the scenes, it seems like it was just kind of a matter of time and research for somebody to discover, well, Bing is a large component that touches everything within Microsoft. Can Bing touch things that we can't directly attack from the web interface? Maybe it can do it for us on our behalf, right? Without maybe confirming things or inherently using whatever permissions it as an application already has. And so there's a lot of really interesting components with this. Now, Microsoft is, coming out and acknowledging it, and they're working on fixing this. And there wasn't really any evidence that it was used outside of this, but we shall see also where that goes. For the sake of time, do we want to show how Big Blue is also doing something good in this world?
Yeah, absolutely. We can do that. This one is fun actually. I know a guy who might be kind of like directly related to this. But Microsoft is bringing back what I'm calling Clippy for cybersecurity. This is a fun story. They're introducing an AI chatbot for cybersecurity experts. But you found this one, so why don't you take it away?
Yeah, coming to us from CNBC, who published this article about Microsoft, not just the fact that we're all very much aware that they purchased OpenAI, right, and then they're launching Bing into ChatGPT, but the fact that they're now going to start using this technology as part of an experience in cybersecurity. So Microsoft dubbing it Copilot, Security Copilot, draws on their latest rendition of GPT-4, and it's going to be a kind of that experience in like an analyst perspective. Hey, let's talk about these systems and what's going on them, and how we can help deal with this and identifying compromises. It's almost like adding a virtual companion to your SOC team
Yeah.
when you subscribe to the Microsoft ecosystem.
It looks like you're trying to build an after action report. Would you like help with that? Is
Hey,
essentially
yeah. Or hey, can you write a summary in 300 words or less of this compromise and include 3 main bullet points of areas of improvement? Like, yes,
yeah.
ChatGPT will totally do that for you.
Yep. There are things here that might raise red flags for cybersecurity professionals, like the fact that the system knows your cybersecurity environment and the context of it, so that it can build these, like it can build a PowerPoint slide summarizing a security incident for you. And to do that, it has to know the context of your cybersecurity environment. But Microsoft made it clear that that data is not used to train models. But it's still, this is a system that has access to your cybersecurity environment, and as we've talked about numerous times over the last couple of weeks and over the last year, right? Anytime you trust a third party with your information, you better be really sure that you know exactly what's happening with it, where it's going, and how it's going to be protected.
Yeah. And just to kind of lay a preface, right? This isn't, I was just posting about this for anybody who follows me on LinkedIn. I was talking about how apps used to be the Tinder of, right, by description. And now apps today are but with AI. And we're seeing a massive jump in more functional AI, not like the AI ML of yesteryear for a sales talk, but this is actually, a component that's utilizing your data and providing actionable information on it. We're starting to see this a huge in the security space, not just on the threat side, which we've talked about on the show, but now actually in the defensive side. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how this is. and how this turns out. I just don't want people to feel like I don't want it to feel like they end up getting cornered into a product to be able to do better security.
Yeah, exactly. But it is, this is a huge kind of leap forward in the ways that we can use AI to make our jobs, make our lives easier. And especially once these kinds of models start to be more, of course.
Oh, we lost you.
All right, you know what? That's a sign.
So we should wrap it up. And real quickly, also thanks, Adam. But yes, this is the future of Bonsai Buddy, but better, not malware. So, well, it sounds to me like Tristan is having technology challenges over there, and so I will go ahead and wrap us up. But for all of those tuning in online live, thank you. Welcome back. For all of those watching us in the future, we appreciate it. Please leave comments below or on the side, wherever it is on your web interface. We do read them all, and we really appreciate the interaction and activity. And so, for everybody, again, this has been GPS Live for the week of March 31st. 2023. And I am Jonathan Singer.
And I have been and will continue to be Tristan Morris. And we will see you,
everybody,
next week. Oh, let's get that video. Okay, I got so distracted I forgot to pull up the video. Where is it? Where'd it go?
Go.
There.